7 years of atomic tests in Nevada. Fears over radioactive fallout peaked in 1958, and the United States imposed a moratorium on nuclear weapons testing. The blasts at the Nevada testing grounds stopped. It had been a long time coming. There had been 152 atmospheric atomic detonations done by the United States in Nevada and the Pacific between 1946 and 1958. 82 of them at the Nevada test site.
As scientists were learning more and more about the effects of nuclear weapons, it became clear that maybe we should not be detonating nuclear weapons in the atmosphere because the fallout was circulating the globe. It was causing unrest in people that were downwind. And the Soviet Union was conducting some really big ones that were showing up on our soil too.
By 1958, the entire world had become concerned as radioactive isotopes had been found in nature, like iodine-131 and strontium-90, both of which turned up in cow's milk. Worse, there were reports of similar radioactive material found in the breast milk of new mothers. Legendary newsman Walter Cronkite had originally been thunderstruck by the blast, like at this one in 1953.
You will hear the blast and, of course, see the fireball from this bomb.
But now, in 1961, 8 years later, he feared the worst.
Strontium-90 is just one of a couple of hundred kinds of radioactive garbage left by atomic bombs, thrown into the air as a powder, carried downwind, drifting back to Earth over the course of days, weeks, years.
3 years to the day that the ban went into effect, the Soviets broke the moratorium and began testing again. The move by the Soviets gave the United States the green light to continue its own new testing, despite safety concerns from the public. Many of the tests were moved underground in an effort to stop radioactive fallout from skyrocketing into the atmosphere. For more than a year, Test Site Secretary Peggy Hallerberg and her colleagues had asked the scientists for whom they worked to take them to see an underground detonation.
We climbed into this gray government trailer. There probably were 10 people in the trailer. We're waiting for the shot to go off.
Called the Sedan Shot, it was the largest of the Nevada site's underground tests. A 100-kiloton device placed 636 feet below the ground in a shaft drilled into the desert floor.
You see tons of dirt flying into the air. You feel the vibration and the shock wave, and everybody's looking at each other like, oh my God, look what just happened.
The blast lifted a dome of Earth more than 300 feet in the air. After 3 seconds, the dome vented. It collapsed in on itself. The secondary shock wave sent 12 million cubic tons of soil into the Nevada sky.
It was an astounding thing to observe. Blue sky high, shook the ground. It's something I'll never, ever, ever forget.
Today, what remains of the Sedan nuclear test stands as a looming silent witness to the power unleashed here in 1962. Some radioactivity still lingers, but not enough to make this place dangerous for tourists.
You will see this huge crater that's unbelievable in size, and look down the bottom of it and you'll see tires that look about the size of lifesavers.
Despite the continuing arms race with the Soviets, in 1963, President John F. Kennedy cited unprecedented health risks from nuclear fallout and urged passage of the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty.
the loss of even one human life, or the malformation of even one baby, who may be born long after all of us have gone, should be of concern to us all.
The Soviets agreed. From that point forward, above-ground nuclear tests by the superpowers stopped. The mushroom clouds above the Nevada desert disappeared. Between 1951 and 1992, there were 1,021 detonations at the Nevada test site. 100 of them above ground during the 1950s and early 1960s. An arms treaty with the former Soviet Union ended the detonations for good in 1992. Now called the Nevada National Security Site. The area remains busy with underground supercomputer testing labs simulating detonations.
Hopefully, never have to detonate a nuclear weapon, but if we do, we want to make sure they work. And how do you do that if you don't have full-scale nuclear testing?
I wouldn't take anything for the experiences. It was a job that needed to be done, and I was very, very proud to be there to take part of it.
Those that know the story of the atomic age in this desert know if nuclear tests ever need to resume, the Nevada test site is always ready.
In 1945, Allies are closing in on Japan.
We used bazookas, flamethrowers, and it was a slaughter.
Americans find a bloodbath on Okinawa. Australians move in on Borneo. And rescued POWs reveal a nightmare in Thailand.
In almost no time, we have become Skeleton Man.
With rare behind-the-scenes film and color combat footage, hear the voices and feel the fight.
We knew that we were going to be in for trouble. We just knew it.
General Douglas MacArthur is coming home. This is Corregidor in the Philippines, where MacArthur made his last stand before defeat 3 years ago. Now he's back to address the paratroopers that just helped liberate it. The battle is so fresh, the shoots are still blowing in the trees.
The capture of Corregidor is one of the most brilliant operations in military history.
Prone to overstatement, MacArthur is also prone to emotion. The Philippines are flying the American flag once more.
I see the old flagpole still stands. Have your troops hoist the colors to its peak and let no enemy ever hold them down.
But the flag is flying over a territory in tatters. The grand city of Manila is gutted. Official buildings are reduced to rubble. Neighborhoods are razed. But weeks after liberation, Manila is on the mend. British war journalist William Courtney tours the city on a horse-drawn carriage and captures the sights with his own camera. Filipinos are on the rebound. Between bombed-out buildings is a sure sign that war has moved on. The USO has moved in. Courtney's camera rolls as Hollywood stars and servicemen and women meet face to face 7,000 miles from home. Comedian Joe E. Brown has come to boost their morale. His comic rubber-faced expressions translate all the way to the back row. Throughout the Pacific, the USO brings laughter to places that only recently knew horror. Touching down on this dusty airstrip on Tarawa, another celebrity. By now, Bob Hope has logged over 30,000 miles across the Pacific. At every stop, he and his troupe are escorted to thousands of fans eagerly awaiting the show of a lifetime.
Here he is, Bob Hope!
By now, Hope knows the reality of life in the Pacific almost as well as the men.
Thank you. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? This is Bob, Mosquito Network Hope. I really hope you enjoy our show today. We have a nice show here with Francis Langford, Jerry Colonna, Tony Romano, Patty Thomas, and Bonnie Dean. I know you'll enjoy the girls. You remember girls? Yes, sir, they're doing very fine. Some of these islands we visited, these girls have been the first to land. Won't Eleanor be mad,
Hope is not the only one putting smiles on American faces. There are plenty of big stars, thousands of lesser-known names. They perform show after show for homesick troops all over the Pacific. Wherever there's a USO show, war has passed. But in these pre-dawn waters, it's only beginning. Here, the stage is set for a very different show. No laughter, just a nervous silence. It's Easter Sunday, 1945. Many of these men think it might be their last day on Earth. The morning light reveals a stunning sight. The largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War. A line of steel, almost 8 miles wide, is closing in on Okinawa.
I have never in my life seen so many Navy ships. The aircraft carriers were lined up as far as I could see.
1,500 ships. 500,000 men. Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, all had beaches covered in blood. Now Americans are wiser and wearier. They expect an 80% casualty rate. Among the faces is David McFadden, a kid from Ohio who remembers the fear.
There were hundreds of boys. Only thing you could hear was the ship's organ playing Near My God to Thee. And boy, don't you think there weren't a lot of them thinking that. Young boys, really young.
This is the last stop in the island-hopping campaign toward the Japanese mainland. From Okinawa, Americans can stage a massive invasion of Japan itself. It is 70 miles long. In square mileage, it's no bigger than the city of Los Angeles. Its terrain features craggy clusters of small mountains, including ridge lines that run east to west, creating a natural barrier to southward travel. Americans have limited intelligence going in. Aerial reconnaissance is lacking. They can only guess at what lies ahead. This Japanese film offers clues. For 3 years, Americans have been pushing them back across the Pacific. Okinawa is their last stand. The Allies expect a final showdown. Invasion Day Easter Sunday is nicknamed L Day. The men coming ashore expect the worst.
I was thinking, well, maybe in an hour from now, I won't have to worry about anything anymore.
But instead of enemy fire, they meet an eerie silence. They move cautiously, expecting a trap. But there's no sign of the enemy. Some wonder if they've landed on the wrong island. First Lieutenant Charles Kilpatrick is as surprised as anyone.
You're expecting the usual welcome committee from the Japanese. It didn't happen. We didn't hear a shot fired.
Word gets back to the fleet. There is no one to fight. Subsequent waves of troops come ashore. They calmly grab their gear and walk upright onto the beach. The invasion presses forward. In the first few days, Marines march unimpeded through the midsection of the island and secure it coast to coast. They tick off military objectives like a grocery list, all while enjoying a fine stretch of weather on a subtropical island. One general says to the press, "I don't know where the Japs are, and I can't offer you any good reason why they let us come ashore so easily." Americans think 100,000 Japanese are defending Okinawa. Question is, where?
Hi, Phil Swift here for FlexPace.
States premieres
Like heaven. Instead of an invasion, it seems like a vacation. Soldiers pick ripe tomatoes along the road. They commandeer local horses and take joyrides. They avail themselves of the local livestock and try to one-up each other's barbecue. One soldier recalls such a cookout to be one of the best meals of his life, and what was supposed to be the battlefield of his death. So far, the Battle of Okinawa is a cakewalk. In charge of the invasion is General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr. He is straight from Central Casting, tall, silver-haired, and no nonsense. He is surprised things are going so smoothly and wonders what the enemy is thinking in a letter to his wife Adele.
Everything's now going well, and so far my opposing general has not displayed any noticeable degree of military brilliance. I hope he keeps this up.
Buckner's Japanese counterpart is Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima. He is respected by his men, cut right from the samurai tradition. A tradition that includes fighting to the death.
Do not suffer the shame of being taken prisoner. He will live for eternity.
The Japanese will soon reveal their strategy. Suddenly and lethally. April 6th dawns quiet in the waters off Okinawa. The calm did not comfort Ensign Doug Aitken.
We knew that we were going to be in for trouble. We just knew it.
On the nearby islands, The Japanese had been gathering every usable plane and pilot remaining in their arsenal. Some are inexperienced, but no less devoted. They call this mission Kikusui, or floating chrysanthemum. They take off in waves. They begin a kamikaze spree that dwarfs anything before or since. In the next 2 days, over 350 enemy planes wreak absolute havoc. American pilots try to stop them in roller coaster dogfights. Navy gunners try to derail them in white-knuckle high-speed combat, sometimes close enough to see each other's faces. On April 6th alone, 3 ships are sunk outright. Another 15 are hit and damaged. The attacks leave a flotsam of twisted steel and blood. But it's only the beginning of Kikusui. In the midst of this nightmare, news reaches the front lines. President Roosevelt is dead. For 12 years, he steered the nation through depression and war. Some troops are so young that Roosevelt is the only president they remember.
You'd see grown men crying like babies because we had lost somebody who was a father figure to us.
We also wondered, now what? Roosevelt was our man. Who is this guy truly?
On the ground, Americans are still looking for the Japanese army. They move cautiously. Suddenly, near the village of Shuri, troops come under intense fire. They answer with volleys of their own. When the Japanese charge with machine guns and flamethrowers, Americans have to retreat. Soon after, another company endures a hailstorm of mortars coming in at more than 1 per second. They lose 45 men. U.S. forces find themselves pinned down by unrelenting fire. They have run into the Shuri Line, a defensive colossus built into a mountain range. It is a masterstroke of military design. The Japanese are entrenched on the reverse slope, invisible to approaching Americans. Every Japanese position supports another. Every American is caught in crossfire. America's honeymoon in Okinawa is over. The Shuri Line is an 8-mile-wide, coast-to-coast killing zone. The worst elements of Pacific warfare, all rolled into a single nightmare. This is where America realizes the brutal truth. The Japanese are no longer fighting to win. They only want to turn the conquest of Okinawa into a drawn-out bloodbath and give America second thoughts about invading mainland Japan. As April turns to May, it's working. What started as a cakewalk has become a meat grinder. The Shuri Line has stalled the American advance and spilled rising amounts of blood. So far, there are 20,000 casualties, more than Tarawa and Saipan combined. Okinawa is becoming the Pacific Theater's black hole. Then, from the European theater, news breaks.
Throughout the world, throngs of people hail the end of the war in Europe.
The world celebrates. Hitler is dead. Germany surrenders and Europe is at peace. But on the other side of the world, Japan still won't budge. The battle for Okinawa has already dragged on longer than Iwo Jima or Saipan. The war seems endless. Combat fatigue spreads like a disease. Some units are on the front lines for almost 4 straight weeks under constant bombardment. Through May, nearly 14,000 troops are pulled back with what the military calls non-battle injuries.
We had a lot of people who had what we call a 1,000-yard stare, just looking off, not thinking anything. We lost a few that were just completely gone.
First Lieutenant Charles Kilpatrick sees one officer hit the wall.
And he just broke down. He said, "I can't do it anymore. I can't send any more boys out there to get killed."
Until they crack the Shuri line, they're trapped in a slaughterhouse. Overlooking the city of Naha is a close triangle of small peaks: Horseshoe, Half Moon, and the now infamous Sugarloaf. On May 12th, a company of Marines starts to climb. The higher they get, the more fire they take. Half the company is wounded or killed on the first day. They retreat. The Marines, like Thomas Durham, claim not to know that word.
The Marines didn't retreat. We made a rapid advance to the rear. Those Japs are damn good fighters, and they were ready to meet their honorable ancestors. We were not.
The Americans realize that Sugarloaf is the western anchor of the Shuri line, the defensive wall they've already been pounding for a month. They can't break through until they win this hill.
Elite soldiers depend on night vision binoculars while conducting some of the world's most covert operations. Hi, Hunter.
Hat perfectly aligned. Of your feet, and it's patented up.
The vibration coming up through your legs.
It helps. Some of the most ferocious fighting that has ever been recorded in history went on during this time, during World War II. And as the commentators is talking about, that the war basically ended over in Europe, but our guys was still fighting to the death because Japan just wouldn't recognize any type of surrender. And it was so brutal that it was horrifying in seeing how many men was being butchered. As we go further into this, you'll understand the reason why that it become essential, imperative, that the atomic bomb was used to be able to stop the war. It was truly sad.
Their lives are turning into ashes. Seeking shelter from the storm of combat, they stream into burgeoning refugee camps. Sometimes more than 1,000 a day. They have no kinship with the Japanese, no loyalties to the Americans, and no idea how to get through it alive. General Buckner writes,
A few Okinawans had been given guns. They don't know either how to fight or how to surrender. They shoot a few rounds and go into caves, but won't come out and have to be killed.
The only life they ever knew has been blown apart. They are shell-shocked. Children are most vulnerable. If they aren't directly injured, they are malnourished and surely confused and terrified. In one instance, Americans come upon a girl who refused to retreat with Japanese troops. As punishment, they cut off her foot. It will take a long time for Okinawans to recover from having their island turned into a killing field. Elsewhere in the Pacific, Americans have help. On Borneo, Australians lead the invasion of Labuan. It's a big Japanese supply hub. From here, they've been shipping local oil and rubber back to Japan. Journalist William Courtney is filming from the open hatch of an Australian bomber. Gunners inside take aim. They target the ships first. Here, a long plume of black smoke pours from an oil tanker. The waist gunner tries to finish it off, tracers blazing. They leave dozens of Japanese transports burning on the beach. Then, 90 American and Australian ships get into position. With one signal, the barrage begins. Rockets arc into the beachhead. 20-millimeter shells pierce the air.
We blasted the island with everything we could possibly throw at them.
Yankee gunners clear the way as Aussie troops brace themselves for combat.
To say we were scared would be an understatement, but we were joking amongst ourselves, which steadied our nerves.
Finally, they land, unopposed. The pre-landing bombardment does its job. The Australian troops stroll onto Labuan. It's like Okinawa, an eerie calm. Just hours later, two commanders come ashore. Australia's Lieutenant General Morshead and America's General MacArthur. MacArthur never likes to be seen breaking a sweat. On Borneo in June, he relents. They survey the scene, including dead Japanese. Most, they learn, are dug in further inland. It will be up to the Aussies to dislodge them. They heave shells into the rugged interior with a British field gun. It's a start, but they know they'll have to go in themselves. When they do, they pay the price, mostly from landmines and booby traps. The Japanese fight to the end, preferring death to capture. Only 200 survive out of 2,000 troops. Civilians are scarred, but they hope the big men in the funny hats signal better days ahead. The boys from down under are taking back Borneo and bringing back peace. On Okinawa, peace is still a pipe dream. Americans are throwing their biggest hardware at the Shuri Line, Japan's colossal line of defense. It's an unknown underground maze. A surprise attack could come from anywhere, so Americans don't take any chances. Explosions stun anyone inside. Often, the enemy stumbles out. Other times, it is civilians. From Sugarloaf Hill all the way across the Shuri Line, progress is agonizingly slow. One general estimates there are 70,000 Japanese holed up underground. I see no way to get them out, he says, but to blast them out, yard by yard.
Keeping your floors clean requires different tools for different kinds of messes. You might need to
It's really sad whenever you have countries at war like this, to the point that bloodshed seems to be the only answer. It had reached a pivotal point of standoff that even to this day, the scars of war are still just as real. May we never forget the sacrifices of our men and women who fought for us to have what we have today pertaining to our freedoms. These people that want to burn the American flag and disrespect our allegiance pertaining to our national anthem, our people, as far as I am concerned, need to be all gathered up, put on a boat in an airplane, sent to an island, and give them some supplies and tell them all good luck. Because if they don't have no more respect for America than that, they don't deserve, as far as I'm concerned, to live here. That's just my opinion, and it didn't cost you nothing. But whenever it comes to the freedom of our democracy and our Constitution, I believe that it has went way beyond that in which what our ancestors originated for it to go. Whenever it gets to the point that you can spit on an officer, cuss openly to those who hold authority above you, burn the American flag, something has happened to the moral value of the American government to allow such behavior and call it okay. It's insulting. It's disrespectful. And it shouldn't be allowed. That's one thing that I do stand firm with Donald Trump on. That people that act this way and behave this way should not be liked, should not be respected, and should not be appreciated in any form or fashion. I don't care if they're with a ball team. I don't care if they're with the National League or if they're with a bunch of Nazi skinheads, Aryan brothers out here that decide to want to protest something like that. Like I said, as far as I'm concerned, they need to load them all up, put them on a boat, put them on an airplane, send them to an island, and say good luck. Create your own government. Live out your lives as you see fit. But to think that we have to allow for people like that to continue to contaminate young, undeveloped minds over here in America just proves that their ideology has, in fact, made its mark stateside here in America. And that's the very thing that our men and women fought to prevent from not happening. That's the reason why that they was laying their lives down on the line to prevent from stuff like that from happening over here. Sad. Super, super sad.
War on Okinawa doesn't make things easy at sea. As the weeks drag on, Admiral Chester Nimitz increasingly views his fleet as sitting ducks. Pressure of war takes its toll. Kamikazes keep coming. At their peak, attacks kill an average of 30 sailors per day. There is no end in sight. A Zero is filmed heading straight for the USS Bunker Hill. 600 killed or injured. For sailors like Howard Jones, the horror is burned into memory.
The smoke went down in the ship, and so many guys suffocated.
Japan intentionally crashes 1,900 planes in suicide dives around Okinawa, the most intense kamikaze attacks of the entire Pacific campaign. They sink 26 ships and damage 164 more. The Japanese consider it noble sacrifice. The Americans consider it inhumane warfare.
The next day, the worst part of my life was we had to get all these guys together in, the bags.
You can't identify people. The right thing to do is bury at sea.
It is the greatest concentration of Navy losses since Pearl Harbor. Since the first failed attacks, Okinawa's Sugarloaf Hill has become a massacre. With Japanese holding the other two hills nearby, there is crossfire no matter where the Americans charge. 2 days into it, Marines charge up again. Go, go, go! After 48 hours of non-stop fighting, they are back where they started, less 400 casualties. They try again, this time with 1,200 men. Same result. By now, the equivalent of 2 full regiments have attacked and gotten nowhere. For days on end, they fight over the same hill. Marines throw grenades from one side, take incendiary fire from the other. At times, their trenches are only 25 yards apart. On a single day, the crest of the hill changes hands 11 times. And the days wear on. Dead and wounded pile up around this little mound, barely 50 feet high. After 10 days, Americans finally climb Sugarloaf Hill and hold it. They stand on the shoulders of more than 9,000 fallen comrades. A military historian would later call the battle unmatched for closeness and desperation. Some regiments lose 2/3 of their men. It is one of the costliest pieces of ground in Marine Corps history.
We didn't have much celebration. They just wanted to go home, and you couldn't blame them.
With the Shuri line about to fall, the exhausted Americans hope they are nearing the end of combat. But just when Americans think the Japanese are on the run, rain soaks Okinawa, almost 12 inches in 10 days.
Heavy rain has stopped our tanks and is impeding supply just at a time when rapid progress is most desirable.
What is already difficult terrain becomes nearly impassable. Roads become rivers, camps become swamps, and war becomes impossible.
Mud got so deep that suddenly we stopped getting supplies. We weren't getting any shells, any hand grenades, any food, any water. Even bulldozers would sink as much as 3 feet down in the mud, so they couldn't haul it to us.
Troops have to lug ammunition to the front by hand. Wounded have to be carried all the way back to rear medical units. Sanitation measures break down. Morale sinks. The Japanese could retreat into the relative comfort of their caves. The Americans could only wait it out in cold, wet misery.
As it rained, the foxhole would start filling up with water. Everybody smelled. You had blood on you and parts of bodies on you. Everybody got diarrhea or dysentery.
For more than a week, it appears to be a standoff. But the Japanese are not standing still.
Finding dental and insurance plans can be confusing. Confusing like, why am I sitting here in a hospital gown waiting to get my eyes checked?
It was dreary. One of the most dreariest wars known unto mankind. To add insult to misery, the weather wasn't cooperating. That's the benefits of war. That creates so much misery that it's unhumane to think about how much suffering that humanity can bring upon each other. It actually reaches a level of insanity. Why in the world would two groups of people want to bring such misery because of an ideal, a thought, and our men win pertaining to democracy and will continue to win no matter what. And that's the part that the communist controlled countries still to this day don't understand. That's the reason why men and women, even to this day, are willing to stand up against this type of tyranny and say we're not going to put up with being ruled like a bunch of dogs, like a bunch of animals, simply to bring pleasure to a tyranny type unjust society that wants to rule them like they're a bunch of slaves and imbeciles.
The Americans mobilize. The Japanese defenses on the Shuri line are crumbling. U.S. troops have been pounding away at this one ridgeline for 2 bloody months. So far, 20,000 Americans have been wounded and 50,000 Japanese killed, just to crest its heights. Now they are closing in on the enemy's headquarters at Shuri Castle, where they hope General Ushijima himself is holed up for the final showdown. They find the castle blown to bits by American artillery.
They must have shot $1 million worth of shells into that thing, just kicking it up in dust.
Troops find it unrecognizable, undefended, and abandoned. The Japanese have vanished. Again. American troops raise a flag, but the victory is hollow. By now, they realize the enemy is building up another line farther south to extend the war as long as possible. For the soldiers on Okinawa, June is an exhausting slog to the bottom of the island. The retreating soldiers are being killed at a rate of 1,000 per day. Cave defenses are still a threat. Americans fire streams of liquid flame to incinerate anyone inside. Then use explosives to seal the cave shut. General Buckner calls this method blowtorch and corkscrew. Okinawa is now about killing, not capturing. At sea, it's the same equation. Kill first, take prisoners later. Far from Okinawa, in the South China Sea, the submarine USS Pomponido patrols the area after torpedoing 2 distant Japanese ships. 4 days later, they spot desperate survivors clinging to floating wreckage. The submarine commander gets a shock.
They were speaking English.
My eyes were paining with oil, but we got a rope and were taken aboard.
These men are Australian and British prisoners of war.
We had a devil of a time trying to get them on board. They were too slick to pick up.
2,000 of them were crammed onto 2 Japanese cargo ships when they were torpedoed by the Americans. Most of the POWs are dead, sunk by their own side. The lucky ones survive, barely, after 4 days on the open sea. 150 are rescued.
They were very thankful. They said, "You bloody Yanks, you sink us one night and pick us up the next." But they said they were darn glad they were sunk, and that they would cheer every time we hit their ship, because they wanted to see the sons of guns go down.
Can you imagine the shock we got? Water, tomato soup, and crackers. Something we had never had in 2.5 years.
The crew gave them clothes and wrote letters for them. It was amazing to see their brotherly spirit.
As the survivors gain strength, they unspool a story that defies belief. They come from a secret prison camp deep in Thailand, with enough POWs to fill a city, 250,000 men, including 60,000 British, Australians, and Dutch, and at least 1,000 missing Americans. They were brought here to build a railroad from Thailand to Burma, across the River Kwai. The men are beaten and tortured, forced to live as slaves. Reuben Candler, a British POW, describes the horror.
The appalling conditions have made us dangerously thin. We have no beds, inadequate shelter, atrocious diet, and no sanitation. We have lost all our clothes, shoes, and have taken to wearing our shirts as loincloths. In almost no time, we have become skeleton men.
Nearly 1/3 of the POWs die in captivity. Survivors have no end in sight. All they see are their own comrades wasting away. On Okinawa, this single battle is dragging into its 3rd month. The Japanese have few places to hide. Americans can see the coast. They're burning their way to the sea. Japanese leaders are huddled in seaside caves. It is so cramped that General Ushijima cannot stretch out his legs. He receives a message from General Buckner, an offer to enter negotiations for surrender.
You understand as clearly as I that the destruction of all Japanese resistance on the island is merely a matter of days.
Ushijima laughs it off and does not reply. Soon after, a cameraman captures General Buckner visiting a forward observation post to see the final days for himself. Minutes after this footage is taken, a shell explodes on a rock right next to him. A piece of it tears through his chest. In just 10 minutes, General Buckner is dead. He drifts off to sleep as a Marine private holds his hand, saying, "You are going home, General. You are homeward bound." As Americans approach the coast, General Ushijima sends his final message to Tokyo.
We are about to deploy all surviving soldiers for a final battle, in which I will apologize to the Emperor with my own death.
On a ledge overlooking the sea, Ushijima performs the samurai ritual of harakiri, plunging a saber into his own stomach. The battle for Okinawa is the only contest of the Pacific to cost the lives of both commanding officers. 82 days after L-Day, when Americans came ashore to wrestle Okinawa from an unseen enemy, they can finally declare victory. The island is theirs.
In Okinawa, the war was over, and there wasn't anything easy about any of it.
There is much to celebrate, but also many to mourn. The United States loses 12,520 lives in Okinawa. More than 36,000 are wounded. The Japanese toll is astounding. Americans count more than 100,000 bodies, with the actual number probably higher. And about a third of the Okinawan people are dead. Another 100,000, unable to survive two vast armies warring on their island. America is now at Japan's doorstep. But the body count on Okinawa makes the military shudder at the thought of invading Japan itself. They increased their casualty estimate for the invasion to 1 million men. President Truman will have to weigh those numbers against a new option. One that will forever change the course of warfare. By the summer of 1945, the Allies are tearing Japan to shreds.
We'd scatter in all directions and shout, "They're coming!"
A ground invasion seems imminent. The largest amphibious assault in human history.
We knew the beaches. We knew the order of battle.
But one bomb changes everything.
People just sat, catching fire.
Some memories will never fade.
I experienced the collapse of our nation.
And no survivors will ever forget.
My mother thought I had been killed.
Hear the voices and feel the fight.
We were going up in daylight and dropping leaflets that said, "We advise you to evacuate your town because we're coming up here Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock to burn it to the ground."
In March of 1945, General Curtis LeMay took a torch to Tokyo in the world's first large-scale use of napalm bombs.
The first fire raid on Tokyo flattened 16 square miles of the city. LeMay was ecstatic. He ordered more of those missions immediately.
LeMay targets any place with a war industry. In a matter of months, America firebombs 67 Japanese cities. Fueled by wood and wind, flames washed through Japan like a flood.
Mother, with my little brother on her back, had her feet swept out from under her by the wind, and she rolled away into the flames.
American firebombs kill an estimated 500,000 citizens. LeMay films the damage himself. His footage has never been broadcast before. In some places, only bridges are left, connecting neighborhoods that no longer exist.
I suppose if I had lost the war, I would have been tried as a war criminal. But all war is immoral. And if you let that bother you, you're not a good soldier.
Japan is increasingly desperate. America swoops in ever closer.
June, we had just about obliterated any opposition that we had from the ground or from the air.
Japan deploys its last planes and pilots to face the Allies in dogfights. These battles used to be out over the open Pacific. Now they're over Japan itself. Then the Japanese simply run out of gas.
You would see whole airfields loaded with airplanes, and there wasn't one that could get off the ground. The Japanese were completely out of fuel. You'd find a little cargo boat with 2 or 3 drums of gasoline from some remote island trying to make it back to the mainland.
The Japanese Empire is gasping for breath. Yet there's no sign of surrender. Allies begin planning for the unthinkable.
We had the plans for the landing in Japan. And we knew the beaches. We knew the order of battle. All 6 Marine divisions were going to land in the assault. And we would be followed by 32 Army divisions, including MacArthur's.
It would be the largest amphibious assault in the history of warfare. Codename Operation Downfall.
Then, they were going to embark something like 70 divisions out of Europe and sail directly there.
The high-end estimate of the invasion force is nearly 2 million men. Planners assume that fighting will rage into 1947. After the human wreckage left on Okinawa just weeks earlier, most Marines don't doubt this dire prediction.
We knew they were digging in. All those tremendous defenses in Okinawa, they did in 4 months. They had a lot longer than that to prepare in Tokyo.
An officer told us we were going to be in the assault wave. He said, look to your right, and look to your left. A week after we hit that beach, one of you will be dead. That was a real morale builder.
But President Harry Truman is weighing a different option.
July 16th,
In the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, scientists prepare to hoist a steel globe into a tower of scaffolding. It's the world's first nuclear device. They lift it carefully, knowing if it drops, it'll turn them into dust. If it works at all. This is the moment of truth for the Manhattan Project, the Trinity test. After securing it in the tower, the scientists move 20 miles away. Then, they flip the switch.
It was like being at the bottom of an ocean of light. We were bathed in it from all directions.
We knew the world would not be the same. A few people laughed. A few people cried. Most people were silent.
Then one of Oppenheimer's colleagues turns to him and says, "Now we are all sons of bitches." Trinity was a test of a fragile bomb of unknown power, sitting on the floor of an empty desert. Next, they'll have to figure out how to push one out of a moving airplane.
It's a war zone out there, and your car's paint gets attacked.
Our people realized that this was going to be the only way to be able to stop Japan because of their relentless fighting power. If this device hadn't been created, who knows what the final outcome would have been. It had reached a point of do or die. And the sad thing about it was, Hitler, even though he had surrendered, he was trying to manufacture the same bomb. That is how close that democracy was at its brink of fixing to fail. Unlike any other ideal, vision, or dream that had ever come into existence for mankind, our democracy was fixing to end. If this onslaught of building this bomb failed, this was the Y in the road. As sadly as it was, this was going to be the only thing that was going to show Japan that we mean what we mean, even at the expense of turning everything into a charred, destined oblivion. And of course, if you know anything at all about the history, it wasn't until the second bomb was dropped, whenever they realized that they had been defeated. And true victory had been won.
Only a handful of humans know the atomic age has dawned. For everyone else, the Pacific War still looks like this. Supplying China has stymied the Allies since the start of the war. Japan controls the Burma Road, choking off China from Allied territory. As a workaround, Americans tried flying supplies over the hump of the Himalayas. They tried sending secret agents through Tibet to get on the good side of the 7-year-old Dalai Lama. Finally, they try engineering. Allies try to bypass the Japanese blockade with a new road from the Indian town of Lido. The jungle is no easy place to make a detour.
It was rugged,
We were assigned to Mile Zero, which we called Hell's Gate.
From there, they slowly carve a new ribbon of road for 460 miles.
We used every imaginable tool they had to move the earth.
Workers nickname it the Big Snake. It takes a bite out of every man that works on it.
I lost about 55 pounds up there on the road. The rations and the heat took me bad.
But the effort pays off. A stream of supplies begins to flow into China. Now the pressure on Japan seems to be coming from every direction. Burma can now stand firm with the Allies. Japanese troops dissolve into the jungle, isolated and abandoned. Here, freedom is a relief. In the American West, it's bittersweet. Since 1942, more than 100,000 Japanese Americans have been forced into internment camps. The fears that put them here have not materialized. They haven't become spies or saboteurs. Instead, they've been quietly showing just how American they really are. So even with the war grinding on, America opens the gates.
That was a dividing line in our lives, before camp and after camp.
Roberta and Takeo Shiroma will have to start over.
My parents lost their business.
It's like they're immigrants once more, departing with a few suitcases to a country whose lofty principles do not apply to them. Many Americans don't want them back. One senator suggests they all be deported to Japan. West Coast newspapers decry what they call California's Jap problem.
My father could not get a job. They said, "Have you looked at your face? We can't hire you."
Some even cling to the camps when they could freely leave. But the Shiromas try to heed wisdom from their ancestral home.
We have a phrase that we hear all the time. It's called shigataganai. It means it couldn't be helped. It's something that happened, and you let it go.
That will be easier for some than others. In another desert of the American West, B-29 crews line up for inspection.
He told us that we were in an outfit that might end the war.
Then, they prepare for a high-stakes game of target practice. The Trinity test ushered in the atomic age. But no one knows how to drop such a big bomb out of a plane. So B-29s take off with dummy bombs called pumpkins to drop onto the desert.
I guess they just plowed up these tumbleweeds so we could see a target.
From more than 5.5 miles up, they let it go. On the ground, experts observe the bomb's dynamics.
The first ones tumbled. Then they changed the tail fins. People from Los Alamos were down there timing how long it would take them to fall. Someone joked that they stood in the center of the target because they felt that would be the safest place.
It's not a bullseye, but with the real bomb, it might not matter.
Can your kitchen knife do this? How about this? Well, now it can.
Now it's coming down to the wire. The do or die moment. Los Alamos finished what the Tennesseans had started of the atomic bomb. It was so crucial during that time that up towards East Tennessee they was building a dam to generate enough power that they finished the project approximately a year and a half earlier than projected. But still, they hadn't completed all the final details of the bomb until it wound up going to Los Alamos, and they finished tweaking it of that in which what Oak Ridge lacked. Once more, it was a do or die moment in time for we as an Americans. And it was a time unlike any other time that America had ever been pushed to the max. Of wondering just exactly what was going to occur. Without the sacrifices of our men and women today, we as a society would be speaking a completely different language and would have been taking over to the point that we would have been nothing more than robots or slaves over here to another society. We owe everything to that era, that generation that stood up and defeated such of a evil tyranny that wanted to dominate the whole world. May God have mercy on all of those who have sacrificed so much in our freedoms for democracy here in the United States of America. August 6, 1945.
Teenager Yamaoka Michiko is on her way to downtown Hiroshima.
I was in the third year of high school. I left the house around 7:45.
From the island of Tinian, Colonel Paul Tibbets is on his way to Japan.
We had lulled the Japanese into a sense of false security. For For a week, I sent a single airplane up over these targets. I wanted them to think we were reconnaissance planes.
I wasn't particularly afraid when B-29s flew overhead. I looked up to see if I could spot them. That was the moment. There was no sound. I felt colors. I remember my body floating in the air. I don't know how far I was blown. I tried to say something, but my voice couldn't come out. I said to myself, "Goodbye, Mom."
Below the mushroom cloud, it was black and boiling underneath, like a boiling pot of tar.
Fires burst out from just the light itself. Nobody looked like a human being. People couldn't scream. They just sat, catching fire.
By that time, we were out over the water and on our way back home. It was an easy flight. I didn't have the ability to visualize what this thing really was. There was no measure, no scale by which to judge this thing.
As Tibbets lines up for a medal, rumors swirl about the damage in Hiroshima.
The guys came in with their eyes wide open and asked, "Jesus, is this true?"
A few days later, Americans roll out another atomic bomb, even bigger in size and power. They name it Fat Man.
Fat Man.
Since the bomb hit Hiroshima, Japan has sent no message to the outside world. It is silent, as if in shock. So Americans load up Fat Man and head for the next target, the city of Kokura.
August 9th, 1945.
When the B-29s arrive, Kokura is socked in, with clouds and smoke from burning cities. They peel off for their secondary target. A Scottish POW is in a prison camp nearby.
I saw a plane flying. 2 minutes later came a tremendous clap of thunder from Nagasaki. A gale force wind nearly knocked me over.
Japan isn't sure what's hitting them. America isn't sure what it's unleashing.
It's unleashing hell.
Only those under the mushroom cloud really know. But the world will soon find out. next day, the Japanese contact the Swiss, pass messages to the Americans, even as their carriers launch more raids. Bombs keep dropping. On August 13th, 1,000 carrier planes make their final dive on Tokyo. In 1942, this would have been impossible. Now, it's unstoppable. A scratchy recording of a strange voice goes out over Japanese airwaves. It's Emperor Hirohito. Revered as a distant, godlike figure, he has never addressed the public. Until now.
We have decided to effect a settlement of the present situation by resorting to an extraordinary measure.
The announcement sinks in. Japan surrenders. The world gasps in a moment of disbelief. Exhales in relief. Navy ships racing toward Japan begin to coast.
We had our ship loaded, totally loaded for us to invade.
We got the message. I ran up to the bridge where a good friend was signalman. He spelled out, war is over.
The captain announced, it's against naval regulations, but all hands can lay down to the scullery for 2 cans of beer.
All across the Pacific, men slated for the final assault get the news of their lives.
I guarantee you there was a lot of relief. I don't know how many of us would have survived the invasion of Japan, but not very many, I don't think.
From every corner of their fallen empire, Japanese who fought from the shadows finally emerge into daylight.
They started coming in and putting their rifles down. That was the end of them.
We fell from heaven to hell overnight.
Men who spent the last 3.5 years trying to annihilate each other are now facing each other.
The Japs all came in from the jungle and gave us their swords. Of course, all our officers got the good ones.
In China, Japanese troops are herded into boxcars. A demoralizing start to their long journey home.
I experienced the collapse of our nation. It was really worse than dying.
In Japan, there is shock and shame.
Nobody truly thought Japan would lose.
Since its ancient beginnings in the 1st century, it has never known a foreign occupation. The pride of empire disintegrates into a cloud of fear.
Like us on Facebook. Follow us on...
Thanks for listening. May we never forget those who sacrificed. The true casualties would be in forgetting their sacrifices. Good luck to all of us in our democracy, struggling for utopia and peace. And shalom to my viewers.